Welcome to everyone in the room and for those online who are watching the meeting and to our guests today. I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Board of Directors of March 20th, 2025. Martina, can you please call the roll to ensure we have a quorum of the board present?
Certainly, and at this time, I would like to inform the board that Director Catherine Jones will be joining us remotely in accordance with the Brown Act as amended by AB 2449. Director Jones will be attending remotely due to an unexpected childcare obligation, which qualifies as cause under the provisions of the Act. And I am now bringing her over as a participant. Director Jones, for the record, are there any individuals over the age of 18 present with you at your location?
There are no individuals above the age of 18 in my house.
Thank you, Director Jones.
There were, I would be there.
Welcome.
With that confirmation, we may now proceed with Director Jones participating as a remote attendee with full voting rights. And just as a reminder, per the requirements of the Brown Act, we will need to conduct roll call vote for each voting action on today's agenda. And starting with Bolinas Fire District, do we have Director Molesworth? Do we have Director Jones?
Here.
Do we have for the City of Larkspur, Director Way?
Yes, here.
For the County of Marin, Director Rodoni?
Here.
For Inverness, do we have Director Donahue?
Here.
For Kentfield, do we have Director Evergettis? For Marinwood, do we have Director Shea? For Muir Beach, do we have Director Murray?
Here.
For Novato, do we have Director Goins?
Here.
For Sleepy Hollow, do we have Director Finn?
Here.
For Southern Marin Fire, do we have Director Hilliard?
Here.
For Stinson Beach, do we have Director White?
Here.
For the Town of Corte Madera, do we have Director Andrews? For the Town of Fairfax, do we have Director Kohler?
Here.
For the Town of Ross, Director McMillan?
Here.
For the Town of San Anselmo, Director Schlesinger?
Present.
And for the City of San Rafael, Director Kurtz.
Present. Thank you. And in just a special introduction, Yoav Schlesinger, council member for Town of San Anselmo. Welcome for your first meeting. All right. Any board members have any adjustments to today's agenda? Nope. Are we good? Catherine, you nodding? Okay. Great. Thank you. Open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Board of Directors at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the board. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the board is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 2 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting and mute your microphone when not reporting out. Do we have anyone for public expression?
There are currently no hands at this time.
And any from the room? We're good. All right, we are moving on to Director Brown's update.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think we all know March, is Women's History Month. And as the Executive Officer for Marin Wildfire, on behalf of our organization, I have the honor and the pleasure to take a moment to recognize the incredible women who serve in Marin Wildfires. Marin's Wildfire and Emergency Service, whether as board members, elected officials, member agency, our stakeholders, our environmental stakeholders, Fire Safe Marin, everybody. And every day, these dedicated professionals are working to protect and strengthen our resiliency to wildfire in Marin. And I think if you've been paying attention to wildfire, you have seen the contribution that women have been making towards Marin Wildfire and making our community safer. So thank you very much. And then we have another really awesome thing to talk about. And some of you may notice some of the new artwork that we have been able to put on the walls. You have a couple over here and a few over here. And if you go into our offices, we have some artwork that we purchased from the Cedars. And as you know, we've done quite a bit of work on the Cedars properties, and I've got some really nice thank you letters. And we went and were able to tour their art that their wonderful artists create. And we decided we needed to add some color and beauty to our offices. And so we also have several of the artists here that would like to introduce themselves and describe what being an artist at the Cedars means to them.
Kelly Greenwald.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Kelly Greenwald, and I am one of the featured artists. And um, I, I'd let you guys know that I live in Marin County for 18 years now, and I am one of the artists who I decided to become an author, an illustrator, and do all the pictures. We are from the. I've been at Cedars for a long time, since before I came into Marin, because my parents decided for me to move on with my life, to follow my own dream come true. Um, I become an artist for a long time. Right now, most definitely, I love doing artwork with my colored pencils and pastels and painting and acrylics or the thick pens that I like to use. Um, I love doing portraits, which I really do. And right next to me is Mary Sullivan, Megan Olson, Jeff Haynes, our creator, Sunila, and we are from the Cedar. We are from the we're from um the Cedars, the Cedars American Association. We're from Cedars, and the place was built in 1919. And I've been at Cedars for a long time, for 17 years. Makes me very happy, successful, and I love making art. And we do get paid every third Friday of the month. Um, the person, thank you very much, and thank you for supporting Cedars and donations to the Cedars. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Say your name.
There you go.
Talk to the microphone.
My name is Megan Olson, and I've been at the Cedars for 22 whole years for my whole life, and I want to keep supporting Cedars a lot for because I'm doing all the artwork that I'm working on is all about my past life, what's no longer in business, as a matter of fact.
So what does the art program mean to you, Megan?
It means that I've been coming to Cedars for like I've been coming to the old Victory Center when we were in Fairfax.
Does art calm you down?
Yes.
Does it make you less anxious?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you like to create with a lot of color. right?
Yes.
Okay. And you appreciate going into work every day and working on your art.
Yes.
5 days a week at
Yes.
Fine Art Studio.
Yes. Yes.
And you're a very talented artist. So
Yes.
you like golden retrievers?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, can you say thank you to everyone?
Thank you, everybody. It's nice to see you all.
And thank you, Megan. And I believe one of your pictures is actually in the room.
Okay. Young man.
Jeff Haynes.
Jeff Haynes. His name. He speaks kind of softly. But has your artwork been in the DI Museum?
Yeah,
And did it sell?
I did.
Yeah. And you sold several big pieces in Marin County, you're becoming quite the artist.
Mary.
I know, right? And you go to Fire Studios how many days a week? Yep. Okay. And you, work with Jan and Sunila?
Yeah.
And you wanna say thank you?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
So Jeff's artwork is in, Martina's lucky enough to have Jeff's artwork in her office.
Wonderful.
We've gotten a lot of comments once we put that artwork up, and it's just so wonderful having it here.
So much, everyone.
Thank you. Great connection. Absolutely.
All right, a topic of conversation that came up last board meeting is going to continue to come up, and that is the fire hazard severity maps for the local responsibility. For the local response. Thank you, Kelly.
Bye, everybody.
That was awesome. Sorry. So the LRA maps are published, and we are really considering the LRA maps as a baseline. As Chief Weber and Chief Tyler mentioned, that when each organization, each municipality, fire district adopts the maps, that sets a baseline that you cannot be less restrictive than what those maps would say, but you definitely can be more restrictive than what the maps can say. And when CAL FIRE is making maps across the entire state of California, they really have to paint with a broad brush. And that's what we're finding when we look at the maps for Marin County. They really did paint with a broad brush. If you take a deeper dive with the more granular data, more specific data that we have, I think you're going to see some different risk assessments that each of our communities are going to go through. And we won't have an issue exceeding what for the Board of Forestry at CAL FIRE is saying. So I think that's where we need to go with the as far as acknowledging those maps, accepting those maps, but most of our communities already have well-mapped WUI areas, and that's probably where we're going to lean harder on making Zone 0 ordinances. We did have our U.S. Fire Administration tabletop exercise the first week of March. It was a 2-day exercise, and it was an evacuation scenario in Southern Marin, Mill Valley, Throckmorton Ridge, and also into Marin City. It was an awesome opportunity for some of our younger command level officers, law enforcement or fire chief officers, to come into a room and work through a complicated evacuation scenario. It highlighted some of the strengths of our plans, but it also highlighted some places where we can improve as a county. So it was a tremendous opportunity, and it's also in helping to inform the U.S. Fire Administration as they create nationwide guidance to help create consistency across the nation when it comes to evacuations. Ann's going to touch on this, but I think this is something worth for it to be duplicated in conversation. It's the governor's executive order suspending certain CEQA or environmental requirements. And I actually read our mission statement during our executive committee meeting, where it highlights that in our mission statement, it states that we will be ecologically sound. And we have worked hard to create a trust and a trusting relationship with our environmental stakeholders, and we're not going to violate that trust. We will continue to function at an ecologically sound way, and those are the requirements. But where we might execute or take advantage of these exemptions is in process. When we see process as being an impediment for us to get work done, that's when we will exercise the exemptions. Or perhaps it might be that we can decrease our environmental compliance costs and therefore put more money towards actually implementing the project. Ann's going to go a little bit deeper in there, but I just wanted from the leadership perspective to know that we are not going to violate the trust that we've built. However, we will use these exemptions when it can increase the pace and scale of our work. We have been invited to be part of what's called the Wildfire Science Technology Commons. It's being an organization that's being hosted out of the UC San Diego. And when we start talking about, you may have heard me talk about the WUI Data Commons and how the WUI Data Commons can be a warehouse of data to help inform the insurance industry of whether or not to insure in certain areas and or set rates. the WUI data commons will mostly focus on parcel level data, where the wildfire science and technology commons will probably be where the community level mitigation data is housed. And so I've been asked to be on one of their guiding committees that is exploring new and emerging opportunities. And so we have a really good opportunity with them to highlight what's going on in Marin. They're looking for what they're calling Pathfinder examples. And so we are going to be having some of our projects displayed as Pathfinder examples with this group. And this is probably the last time I'm going to talk about the upcoming Climate and Wildfire Institute and Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force meeting. Tuesday of next week will be the CWI meeting. Wednesday is when we have our keynote speaker with Daniel Swain from UCLA, but also a Marin County native. And that reception starts at 4:30. His talk will start at 6. And then we have our task force meeting on Thursday, where we will have several panel discussions. One of the panel discussions will be about the LA fires. IBHS will be there to talk about lessons learned from the LA fires, which will completely echo all the lessons learned that we have been using to guide our work already. We'll have a panel that discusses Marin Wildfire, the creation of Marin Wildfire, how we implement our work, and how we partner with One TAM. Another panel discussion will be on how data is shared with the public. And the final discussion panel is with the Fire Foundry, where some of the graduates from the Fire Foundry are going to come and be part of the panel discussion and describe their experience through the Fire Foundry and how it's led them to a sustainable career within the fire service. As part of the task force, the last task force meeting we went to was up in Tahoe. Cal Fire did a big show on their dashboards that they have created to display the work that's going on across the state of California. We have been talking about our publicly facing dashboards since almost day one that Marin Wildfire was created, and we needed to build the infrastructure. We needed to build a data collection. We needed to build a GIS framework to be able to display it. Well, we're using the task force as our opportunity to launch our goal 1, which is vegetation management, and our goal 5, defensible space dashboards. And later today, Charlotte will give us a sneak preview of those dashboards, but we're using the task force as our opportunity to launch those dashboards to the public. And then Friday is site visits for projects throughout Marin County, and the attendance is maxed out on Thursday already, and we're almost maxed out on attendance for the site visits on Friday. With that, I could take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Barbara?
Yeah, I know, first of all, thank you. I know you said Anne is gonna speak more on the executive order, but you mentioned where process gets in the way, we may use it. Could you just give an example of briefly what that might be? I'm not sure for me, I know what that means.
I'll give you a very specific example on it, and I think our West Marin board members may chime in on this, but we've been working very hard for the last 2+ years to get a public works plan in place with the Coastal Commission, and it's been a challenge, and we have not been able to get that PWP in place because of the process to get it completed. And we've been ready to do work for the last 2 years. We just have not been able to get through that process. And depending on how the governor releases their management practices, that'll be part of it, which Ann will describe. That will allow us to be able to bypass the PWP, Public Works Plan process, and start doing our work, but we'll make sure that we adhere to all the requirements that we would have had to adhere to.
Okay, and just forgive me if I missed this. How long is the executive order in place? Does it have an end date?
That's the question mark, and Ann will cover that when she gets to her.
Okay, I will hold
report.
my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mark, for the report. I have a question on your tabletop drill. Is there any plan to do other tabletops in other regions?
It's up to each of the member agencies will, each of the fire departments can work with their law enforcement partner to execute them. And there aren't any plans for further tabletops right now that I'm aware of, but definitely would be supportive of those.
And then you did mention that there were some findings that you could have done better in some area. Is there anything that just stood out that we need to work on?
The one that probably stood out to me the most was consistent messaging regardless of which public entity is putting out the message, and understanding who should be pushing out that consistent messaging. That's probably the biggest point I picked up while watching.
Thank you.
Catherine?
On that point, consistent messaging.
I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a board member, I sometimes have a need to know, like right away. So I know that it takes a while to get all the agencies together to get a consistent message. But if you would include, I mean, this is a question, can you include board members right away in dispatching those bullet points that we can, so we can say the right thing in case we are asked by our constituents?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, like right up, instead of waiting a week or two, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Comments? Okay. All right, moving on to the consent calendar. Or do we have no more, any comments from the public on that one?
There are currently no hands raised.
Nope. Okay, thank you. All right, consent calendar. The opportunity for public comment on consent calendar items will occur prior to the board's discussion of the consent calendar. The board may approve the entire consent calendar with one action, and the alternative items on the consent calendar may be removed by any board or staff member for separate discussion and vote. I'll now take public comment on the consent calendar.
And there are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Are there any items that anyone on the board would like to pull? Bruce?
I don't want to remove an item, but I talked with staff here that item 6A, to please correct the spelling of Chief Dicochet and Sarah Laberton from Nevada. Both names are misspelled. Other than that, looks great to me.
Great, thank you. Barbara?
Well, I'll make a motion, but I want to thank Megan. I had asked some questions about the first form of a legal agreement and not including insurance, and she and her partner were able to turn that around, and I think we have, a more comprehensive ensuring that we protect the agency as well as our new partners, same old partners. But anyway, I want to thank you for that quick turnaround. And I would like to make a motion to approve the entire consent calendar.
Wait, I have one more correction.
Thank you. One more correction,
One more correction to the minutes.
please.
Okay, so on page 8 of your packet, okay, it's just a little typo. Okay, so down in the middle of the page, starting with the term Director Way stated that she would be in support of funding these programs as long as repeated twice. It's as long as. So I thought you could take one of those out. Thanks.
All right, good catch. Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. And then do we need to do a roll call vote? So we'll need to do a roll call vote, please.
And that's a motion by Director Kohler with the second from Director Donahue, was it?
Yes.
Okay. And starting with our roll call vote for Mill Valley, Director Jones.
I vote yay.
Right, thank you.
For Larkspur, Director Way. Yes. For County of Marin, Director Rodoni.
Yes.
For Inverness, Director Donahue.
Yes.
For Muir Beach, Director Murray.
Yes.
For Novato, Director Goins.
Yes.
For Sleepy Hollow, Director Finn.
Yes.
For Stinson Beach, Director White.
Yes.
For the Town of Fairfax, Director Kohler.
Yes.
For the Town of Ross, Director McMillan.
Yes.
For the Town of San Anselmo, Director Schlesinger.
Yes.
For Southern Marin Fire, Director Hilliard.
Yes.
And for the City of San Rafael, Director Kurz.
Yes.
And that motion passes with unanimous vote of all in attendance.
Great, thank you. Moving on to staff reports, we have the March Finance Report. Marin Wildfire Treasurer Alyssa Schiffman will provide the staff report on this item. Hi.
Good afternoon, directors. So let's see, as of the date of this report, we're 70% through the year. I did just have a couple things to point out. One is the core expenses are only at 46% of the year. I expect that to accelerate in the near future because several agencies have yet to submit a reimbursement core invoice. I have nudged them, but they are definitely holding on to some expenses that we will get in definitely by the end of the year, but I'm hoping for sooner. Then also the grants, those are red, and I wrote in the notes that it's a timing issue. We just had to do our best guess for the budgeting for the grant pieces, but those are multi-year grants, and I would expect that in the end, once the grants are closed out, those would all be as we expected. It's just on a fiscal year basis, so it gets a little tricky. And then also just wanted to point out on the statement of net assets, throughout the year, we usually operate on a cash basis. We just pay bills as they come. But we do have on the books an accounts receivable because of the grants, the Novato fuel break grant. They did submit that invoice and they're not all paid up. And then also in the accounts payable, we do have a balance there because we are still holding back the DSpace and local pass-through payments, the 55% for 2 agencies. And they know that, and we'll just hold on to that until they have all the reporting components completed. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions regarding the finance report? Catherine?
As directors representing certain areas, would it be appropriate for us to nudge them to submit their invoices, or is that out of our league?
That would be fine with me. But I have reached out to Novato and San Rafael. They're our biggest ones. And
I don't know if that would help if some of the directors could nudge there also.
San Rafael's aware.
Okay. Good. Didn't hear my name in there.
I just want to say specifically that our finance officer is out on issues, and we are seriously strapped right now in Novato to keep up with all of our responsibilities. So please know that we're cognizant of what needs to be done and is forthcoming. Please be patient.
certainly, thank you.
Dennis, please.
Yeah, thank you. Alicia, just wondering about item 6120, a prepaid amount to fire aside. Could you tell us the circumstances of that, or Mark, please?
Yeah, so that's our annual subscription, so we pay it once a year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yep, Director
Sorry.
Schlesinger?
New guy here, so pardon me if this is a stupid question, but the background here says total operating expenditures, are at 50% of the projected target of 70%. Does that mean operating expenditures are at 35% because it's 50% of 70%, or that we're at 50% of 100%, or excuse me, of a projected 70% so that there's 20% remaining versus 35% remaining? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's the latter.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Good question, and we'll do that again. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Nope, seeing none. All right, there's no, let's see, public comment on this item?
And there are no hands for comment at this time.
None in the room. Okay. No motions required on this one, so we'll move over to Anne. Welcome, Anne, on the work plan implementation update.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I'll
A little louder would be good.
Oh, okay.
A little louder? Okay. I'll see if I can project here. Okay. Great. So I'm going to share my screen. Good afternoon, and I'm sorry to not be there in person today. Definitely sorry to miss our Cedar artists. So for those at home, just a reminder that our house out approach is supreme. It's really important, and it's how we structure our programs. So a little summary on where we are in terms of our home inspections. We are looking to hire a total of about 35 inspectors this year for our DSpace Alliance group. And the returning inspectors are already on board and out in the community inspecting homes. So we were able to get started with some of those inspections a little earlier this year, which is great. We'll probably have the full team up and running by mid-June, and they're going to continue inspecting through October. And the goal here is all the WUI properties are inspected about every other year. So it's been a very active season already, and they've been working in the Corte Madera area, and they will be continuing all that great work. Our chipper program, we started signups already, which is great. The actual program will get underway in April. Signups this year have been really impressive. So in the first 48 hours of signups being available, about 1,200 people signed up. Compare that to 2023 in the same time period, that was about 343 signups. So we're quadrupled the volume, more or less, from 2 years ago. So that's a big deal, and we're looking at that as some sort of shift in culture. These are generally people who have not had inspections yet. So it is not a result of inspectors telling them to go ahead and sign up for chipper days. So this feels like a big deal, and that we're moving the needle in terms of the culture of taking care of your own D-space. So that feels like a big win for us. So we're excited about that. We're continuing to disperse funds through the grant program, and our grant specialist is doing the hard work of tracking down folks who've applied for grants but who haven't been super responsive in terms of getting back to us with different details, photos and receipts, etc. So he's been working on that. And then we're also continuing to work on our direct assistance program. A couple of the zones have seen activity for direct assistance. Novato and San Rafael are next, I believe, and then last will be West Marin. So continuing with all that work. And then we're going to talk about this much more later in the agenda, but this is really exciting. We've spent a lot of time and energy figuring out how to collect data, how to build a GIS program, and now we're at the point where we've got models and tools to help inform our work. We're creating dashboards to help show our progress, particularly on goals 1 and 5, and particularly in my world on shaded fuel breaks and vegetation management. So we'll talk more about that later in the agenda. I want to note, we just had an event in the field. Every year, we host a day to kind of refresh our skills for those project managers who are working out on the landscapes and cutting vegetation. And we brought out a biologist, a wildlife biologist, a botanist, an archaeologist, and a geologist. And we all met in Novato, actually, and talked about birds and bats and riparian areas and all the different issues that come up when you're managing projects in the field. It was well attended this year. It's our 3rd year doing it. And it's really exciting to see continued engagement on all of this. And so we talk through all of the questions and the challenging things that you see in the field. But Fire Safe Marin is going to write up an article about it because they attended this time as well. So expect to see something there. We're also planning a site visit to the Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, particularly the Cascade Canyon area. We're nailing down a date now, trying to work through everybody's schedules, but we're excited to bring folks out, especially neighbors in that area, and bring them out to talk about the project because they've been very happy to see crews out there. So this topic has already come up today during this meeting. So let's dive in a little bit. So the state of emergency proclamation daylighted on March 1st. This came from the governor's office. And this in particular is meant to really streamline the regulatory processes around doing fire fuels management. So precisely the kind of work that we do. So defensible space work, shaded fuel breaks, all of that, very relevant to us. So this proclamation in particular suspends certain state, but not federal, state statutes, rules, regulations, and requirements that fall under the jurisdiction of Cal EPA and the California Natural Resources Agency. So that does include CEQA and the Coastal Act And there's a long list of regulatory requirements that fall under these two agencies. The proclamation was a couple of pages long. We have a lot of questions still. The first thing I did was meet with our environmental consultants and our CEQA attorney to really dive into the language and figure out what it might mean. We saw in the language that it applies to projects initiated in 2025. That means that any of the projects that have already been approved and are already being implemented on the landscape, this does not apply to them. So all of the existing shaded fuel breaks and other vegetation management activities that have already been through approval with this board and through CEQA, this doesn't change those projects. But what it does do is provide an opportunity for new projects initiated in 2025. We don't have a definition for the word initiate, so we're assuming that it means you haven't submitted a CEQA document, you haven't broken ground on these projects, etc. It means that these projects will go through an alternative process to determine that they're eligible for this suspension of regulations. So there is still a process, it's just a truncated process. The state will, at some point in the next month or two, we're not really sure, release an environmental protection plan. Sometimes it shortened as an EPP in various documents. So this EPP will probably list a very long list of best management practices that we will then need to incorporate into our projects. And then we don't know what other requirements there will be. There may be GIS requirements. I assume you'll need to write a fairly detailed project description. You would submit that to the state, either one of these agencies. And the secretary from that agency would determine that your project is eligible for the suspension, and then that project would be listed on a public website. So the public will see all of the projects that are using this suspension. So this is not a return to kind of the Wild West of doing work out on the landscape. This is just a shorter pathway to get to probably many of the same requirements that are included in, say, a CalBTP document, for instance. So our approach at this point is to meet with our member agencies, determine what kinds of projects might be eligible for this. For example, some of the work in the coastal zones. So we've had some conversations with coastal member agencies. We have other projects in mind as well. We'll write up those project descriptions. We'll incorporate all of our project design and implementation features, our PDIFs, because we've already done a lot of work to make sure that the projects that we have on the ground are stewarding our landscapes responsibly in an ecologically responsible way. That's not going to change. So we'll continue incorporating all of those PDIFs into our projects. And then we'll see what the state requires of us. It will probably have a lot of requirements from CalBTP, from various permitting pathways, working in riparian areas, or air district, requirements, water quality requirements, things like that. And those will likely be required to be incorporated into your project. So what we'd like to see, and just by the way, in terms of process internally, one of the first meetings I had after this March 1st proclamation was reaching out to our environmental stakeholders and making sure that they know that we will continue being committed to ecologically sound practices. So we met with them early on in this process as well. So, many questions remain. Does this sunset at the end of 2025? We don't know. It doesn't say it does, but it doesn't talk about future years either. It does talk about revisions to the CalBTP, potential revisions to CEQA. So I think this is a stopgap measure, probably, to get work done sooner rather than later. And while this is happening, there will probably be work to revise CEQA exemptions, to revise the CalBTP process, to revise coastal act compliance, etc., to make those more streamlined. So that's probably why there's no specific end date. It probably will end once those revisions are in place. So that's where we are on that. I'm sure many questions remain. We may not have the answers right now, but hopefully we'll get more information in the near future. So I'm going to move on. I'm sure there are more questions, but to the next slides, just to cover a couple more things before I ask you all for questions. I wanted to share where we are in terms of work plan development for the fiscal year 25-26. This is the same slide you've seen before, but a little bigger text and a little easier to read, hopefully. So generally, this is what we've done so far. We've been very busy. Member agency staff have been very busy. We've been working on our tools and our data-driven approach, and you'll hear more about that later. We've been updating the portal. The ATC and operations committees have been meeting in December, January, February, and now March. We've had JPA-wide proposals submitted into the portal and reviewed by both the ATC and operations committees, and there are more conversations to have, certainly. But that's in progress. And then zone-specific proposals are getting submitted really as we speak. The end of March is the first kind of real deadline for those proposals so that we can take a minute, see what's been proposed, see how we're looking in terms of budget, and have some discussions at the ATC and Operations Committee. Operations Committee will have an ad hoc subcommittee to dive into specific questions, concerns, proposals, budget questions, etc. And then we'll see this board in May. The date would be May 15th for considering that draft work plan and budget. So just a sneak peek to some of the numbers here. This is assuming a 2.7% CPI. So we're looking at total projected revenue in 25-26 of $22,838,000 and change. And then these are the numbers for in the blue area for core dollars per zone. And then what we also like to do is think a bit outside of the box and budget to 80% of that core dollar amount for each of the zones. And that gives you a 20% kind of priority bucket to think through priorities that would be good for the JPA as a whole. So this year, it's probably going to, some of the conversation is going to center around what to do about this new state of emergency proclamation. Are there opportunities, say in West Marin, in the coastal areas to put some money towards work in those areas? So we'll need to have those conversations as a whole. And that is it for me. So I'll stop sharing my screen and happy to take questions.
Okay, deep breath. I am sure there are a lot of questions. Thank you, Anne. If you have a specific question, maybe we could bring up the slide that you're referencing to bring everyone back to it. Barbara?
I have two questions on two different slides, but going back to the governor's emergency order, just wondering what state agency do you submit those proposals to?
Yeah, stay tuned. We have the same question. That's not specified. So we're not sure. It will likely be Cal EPA or the California Natural Resources Agency. But I think that whole process will be outlined in the Environmental Protection Plan.
Well, just having worked in the state for decades, I think it's really good to work on the coastal proposal, just a suggestion. I don't think those approvals will come very fast, so I wouldn't hold up the rest of our work waiting for this new process. Should the state decide to create some kind of a task force to review these quickly, I foresee more that, I mean, Cal EPA doesn't have staff. Cal EPA is an umbrella agency, so there might be a task force made up of people from Cal EPA agencies as well as natural resources, but I just wouldn't expect those things to happen really fast. I think they're going to be concentrating a lot on LA. But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what's in those plans. And then going back to the slide on the inspections, which was one of your early slides. I don't know that we need to bring the slide up, but you talked about visit every WUI property every other year. We know now that fires are not constrained to the WUI. So are we expanding beyond the WUI for inspections or waiting for people to request inspections? How is that working?
It's yes and yes. We are expanding outside, but also for people who are asking for it, they can do that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions, Julie?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering why, on the governor's 7A, why was this done now and not in 2017 or 2018 or 2020? And
LA.
part two is, if it had been done in 2020 before our agency was begun, I'm just wondering how much money it would have saved our taxpayers to expedite the processes. Just a ballpark estimate.
I'd have to look at our expenditures for environmental compliance for the last few years. It would be substantial. We do have budget that will continue to be spent, and you'll see it in the JPA-wide proposal and the budget around environmental compliance, because we do continue, even for previously approved projects, we continue nesting bird surveys and plant surveys where needed, archaeological surveys if needed, etc. But yes, I think this is going to be beneficial in terms of budget, particularly for large projects. So those that we were considering a CalVTP process for are probably the ones that are going to benefit the most financially in the near term. So we have been thinking about a shaded fuel break network in southern Marin. So that's likely going to see a benefit here, as well as work in the coastal zone. And I believe that this was a real reaction to the LA fires, which I think caught a lot of folks by surprise. And it was a bit shocking to the system. And I think that the state needed to test out the CalVTP process and needed to test the public works plan process to see how effective they would be before moving to this type of proposal. The public works plan process through the Coastal Act and Coastal Commission was meant to be a streamlining tool, but even this tool is a multi-year coordination with Coastal Commission staff to get anything done. And we've been at it for a long time now. We do know already what the county would like to see in projects on the coast and what the Coastal Commission would like to see in projects on the coast. So we can be really responsive to what their requirements are and priorities are in terms of resource protection. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Director Rodoni, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the report. That same slide, I wanted to follow up on where it says projects initiated in 2025 and get your interpretation of that, because that kind of tells me anything we've been working on in the coastal zone may not fit into this emergency proclamation. And as a follow-up to that, if that's so, as we thought about reaching out to the governor's office and our state elected to see if they might tweak this so that all those projects that we had planned that were in process could be covered under this proclamation. And I think it was focused on the LA fires for sure, and that's why 2025 was put in here. But I don't think it benefits in us in ways it could have if the 25 was just removed, or projects that were already applied for could be included, something to that nature. Anyway, just wondered if you thought about that.
Yes, we dove into this word initiated with legal counsel. And, we have work underway in the coastal zone. We have some work along evacuation routes that's limited to what we were able to move through the Coastal Act compliance with the county. who was quite helpful, by the way. But the other work that we have been thinking about in the coastal zone, we have not drafted a CEQA document yet. The public works plan process is a process to create a process. The idea there is you develop a plan for permitting future projects, but it in itself is not a project. So we have not initiated a CEQA document or project descriptions yet for any specific projects in the coastal zone beyond what we already have going. So we do not think that we have already initiated these other projects under this potential definition. So we do think that work in the coastal zone will benefit from this, even with that language around projects being initiated in 2025.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Director Way.
Ann, can I just see that slide again with that, figures, the dollar figures? I think it was slide 5. Or, oh wait, who's in charge of slides? There, that's the one I wanted to just see.
And we'll make sure that the slide deck is included in the archived agenda. So
Oh, good, because it wasn't on here. So I'll look at that then. Thanks.
Yes, you're welcome.
Oh, that was just okay. Director Goins.
Same slide. I have a question. I've been speaking to my chief this year, and there's been some discussions at the operations level in regards to the 80-20 and how members build out their areas, budget and projects. And I'm not clear, and you mentioned, I understand 80% and the 20, and I understand the language in the JPA, but can you be clear, or is there something in writing to say how we're deliberating on the use of the 20% funds within the JPA? It's just not clear to me. I'd really like to see it in print.
Sure. So what we've done in the past is discuss at both the ATC and operations committees whether or not there are projects that stand out or particular priorities for that year to use that 20% for. We have been developing the process as we go, which is why there hasn't been anything in writing quite yet. But member agencies are advised to budget to 80% of core until a decision is made by the operations committee. In previous years, we have used 200,000 of those 20% dollars towards the coastal zone because we wanted to develop a public works plan. And then last year, we ultimately decided to redisperse that 20% back to the zones according to their percentages. So that decision is made generally at the operations committee level, and the ATC discusses it quite a bit as well. So that's how we worked it the last 2 years. I think this year the conversation will be fairly similar, but the operations committee in April will need to finalize that budget and really get those numbers nailed in. And then we adjust projects following that guidance from the operations committee.
And if I can add, the last couple of, when we've used this in the past 2 years, in a staff report to the operations committee, there was recommended guidance on how to prioritize these projects. And last year we tried to we dipped our toe into using science and modeling to do it, but we just had too short of a ramp up time. And so and you're going to see some of the science and data later today, we've been asked our member agencies to really use those tools for prioritizing their projects within their zone and use that as a test drive for those tools. And then when we get to the point of prioritizing across all 5 of the zones, that's where we could take what we learned from using those tools within the zones to apply to the entire JPA.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused, easily so, right? But I am interested in perhaps I can have a conversation, Mark, with you or Ann separately, because I still am confused in regards to the 80-20. I've had constituents ask me about renewal, and yes, we think we want to renew, and they asked where the money goes, and I talked to them about the 80/20, and they said, do you mean that perhaps only 80 cents of what I'm investing here comes to Novato and 20% goes somewhere else? It's a real question that was asked of me. And how do I say to them, I don't know what to say to them. So what I'm hearing is that the 20% is going to go to priority projects as determined by the ops committee. And we've got some modeling conventions, some standards that will help do a hierarchical, top, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. But I would like a little bit more clarity. And it is, from my perspective, it's a policy position, it's a board matter, and I'd like a little bit more information.
You bet. I'm happy to meet with you. But I think as far as that one question you asked, wildfire knows no boundaries. And what is good for one zone is good for another zone.
No, I certainly understand.
And I think it's an opportunity to think, the dollars go where the population is according to this model in general. And I think that it's an opportunity to think through not just where the population is, but where the need and the risk is. And so that's been part of the conversation and part of the invitation as well. Let's think about where the risk is and if there are any projects that are beneficial to the entire JPA that really we should be prioritizing in this moment for this year. And one of the needs that has come up before and will probably come up again is that West Marin is the largest area, but the smallest population, and so has a fraction of the budget of other zones. So this is an opportunity to think about where the risk is and where the need is, rather than where the population is. And it doesn't mean we have to, use all 20% in West Marin or any kind of predetermined outcome like that, but it's an opportunity to think about it in a different way.
Yeah, and to be clear, as president, I advocated for great flexibility in moving funds around. That I'm on record in that regard, realizing that low population areas, little budgets. We have a $40 million budget in Novato, and others have a $200,000 budget. And pathways, these are issues that we have to build out. Get a start everywhere. Everyone needs to be able to get a start on this. I just want to keep tracking this and make sure that we understand what we're doing, how the decisions are being made.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Other questions?
Hi. Thanks so much, Anne. So I have a question about how the executive order and just thinking about the opportunity here and the sequence of projects that we have scheduled for the remainder of the year in our strategic plan. How does this change? You said there's going to be a truncated process. How does this change impact the sequence and our timeline? Are we going to, for example, front-end projects that were delayed or that we just deprioritized? Can we bring those forward? I know you mentioned larger projects may get a faster, more expedited experience, but I'm just wondering what the real tangible opportunity is here and if that changes our strategic plan.
Great question.
Sure, yeah. For the smaller projects, we have been pretty efficient with our CEQA compliance. And so in terms of timeline, I think the larger projects will see a bigger benefit. Even with the smaller projects, because now we have a state of emergency proclamation that we didn't have previously, we could file an exemption, an emergency exemption, in order to cover the smaller projects as additional protection. For the larger projects, and that is a very streamlined process. For the larger projects, we may spend 6 to 9 months and a couple of $100,000 on a CalVTP document and process. Through that process, you kind of know what the end result is going to be because you know what all the project-specific requirements and mitigation measures are already. You don't make up new ones through that process. There's already a list that you then incorporate into your project at the end. So I think the end result will be quite similar to the Cal VTP already, because you already have the language and the best management practices, and you know them from the start. So it may be that this process requires some surveys, botanical surveys or cultural resources surveys. We don't know yet what the benefit will be, but it will probably save many months of coordination. On our end, we believe in transparency and the public process, and so we will probably still continue to host workshops with the public in neighborhoods ahead of these larger projects, which we've done in the past and will likely continue to do. So there will still be process for us, but we think it will save many months and probably a couple $100,000 per project.
Great, thank you. Director Schlesinger?
So, thank you. I am aware that the governor's proclamation also expands the scope of activities to allow non-state entities to conduct approved reduction work with expedited approvals, which allows local organizations, contractors, community groups, et cetera, to participate in the wildfire prevention efforts. So my question is, and I'm assuming the answer to this is yes, is there a pre-existing list of those vendors, contractors, groups, et cetera, that might be selected to partner with on those projects? And if not, what would be the vetting process to expedite the approval of those partnerships in order to conduct these under that loosened restriction around non-state entities' participation?
I don't have a great answer for that. That's certainly an interesting thing to look into.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Thank you. I believe, Catherine, you had a question as well online?
It was Austin answered.
Oh, very good. Okay, thank you. I have, do you have any others in the room, Catherine?
Just to, I think you're a good source for that would be Fire Safe Marin's website, and they're working hard on getting a list of and educating contractors and landscape people about that. Do you want to chime in on that? Fire Safe Marin is working to pre-vet things just like you described, who are well informed on what wildfire mitigation landscape management really is.
Well, I guess is the question, what non-state entities can make approvals or what entities can do the work and what agreements are in place?
Not what non-state entities can perform approvals, but rather for MWPA, what would the approval process look like for selection of partners who are non-state entities? Or is there any contemplation of even doing so to work with vendors, contractors, community groups, et cetera, to perform the work?
So, and what perhaps you and I can meet offline. I can talk to you about our pre-approved vendors list, our master services agreement, and how we've streamlined putting contractors onto projects.
Okay, yeah, that would help. Yeah, thank you.
And I think
that's why I said I assume the answer is yes.
Yes, I think there's a yes and there's an and of with this with the emergency order, could that possibly accelerate bringing in additional resources to get the work done? I think that was also a follow-on piece of that. Other questions from anyone? I have a couple of questions. Following on Catherine's comment about strategy, I was wondering how, around the emergency order, how ATC and ops will be involved in that process. And if we're going to look at sort of a sub-process specifically around the emergency order, or maybe there's a recommendation that maybe we look at that because I have a feeling the state will come with their rules and have a very short timeline in terms of turning things around. And I want to make sure that we've engaged ATC and ops in that process in terms of the prioritization. I don't want to assume that what our current process is also taking into consideration. I think the emergency order gives us a huge opportunity, and not excluding the fact that we still have environmental requirements around this. I think that there's an opportunity to actually push work forward faster. And if we identify that it's not in the coastal area, we shouldn't lose that opportunity to do it someplace else. And so how do we evaluate, and I don't know whether it's large projects or small projects. Is it low hanging fruit versus, is a project that we've already completed, but now we need to circle back and do more work on? Some of our early projects, and we went back up on top of TAM and said, it doesn't, there's areas here that probably need to be done now again. So I'm just wondering if we can really get in front of how to best take advantage of this, because I think this is a good thing. And I think we are so much farther ahead in so many areas that I really don't want to lose the opportunity. And that was more of a statement than a question. And then I also have a question though on Chipper program. With the 1,200 requests that we have, are those being prioritized differently than what we've done in the past? Because that's a lot, and I'm not sure, is it aligned with Zone 0? Are we doing with the inspections? How are we going through those 1,200 to get those prioritized?
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, the 1,200 is well underneath our capacity, so probably isn't much of a need for prioritization in that respect. One of the things that changes that we are asking to make as far as data collection is that when people have material removed through Chipper Day, we'll start asking, did you get this from Zone 0? Did you get it from Zone 1? And start collecting that data to make sure that we're getting materials from where it really matters.
And I'm also curious around Chipper Day, over the time, I mean, we're seeing an increase of response to taking advantage of the Chipper program, which is good. On the other side, at some point, I think we'd be seeing a decline in requests.
We're still seeing an increase in requests, and we're also seeing an increase in pile size on average.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So I just want to keep an eye on that over
We thought we would reach a tipping point at some point. We just haven't gotten there yet.
And are those really the real project? Are those really the right piles that we need to go after?
Right. And that's why we're asking about where they're getting the materials.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Any other follow-on questions? Great report, Anne. Oh, I do have one more comment. Sorry. Can you bring back up the schedule?
Happy to.
Thank you.
And just to note, we will be emphasizing Zone 0 in the direct assistance and grants program next year. And so that's really an opportunity to emphasize Zone 0 and make sure there's good work getting done there. And in addition, with respect to working with the ATC and ops and member agencies to take advantage of the state of emergency proclamation, we've had several meetings and kind of brainstorming sessions thus far. We've talked about it at the committee level and then also reaching out specifically to member agencies to talk about how we may, including San Rafael staff, to talk about how we may take advantage of this. But here's the schedule. We've got completed milestones on this slide, and I have upcoming milestones on the next slide. Which would you prefer?
The upcoming.
Okay.
And again, it's more of a statement than a question. This is a follow-on to the email that I had sent out that we have a really tight timeline. So we go March 31st. And then April 3rd is the ATC meeting. And these meetings are recorded and they're online, but there's also a request that if you have the opportunity to meet with your zone representatives who are on ATC and ops, so you know in advance, because the timeline gets so condensed here. The last meeting is April 15th. We meet April 17th. So this is the moment of opportunity to meet with people so you know what's coming, what the thought process is, how is the budget how is core being allocated, all those different aspects of it. So I was just sort of just have a request. So
And if I can clarify, the ATC meetings are not publicly.
sorry, those are yes, right. Thank you.
I just have a request, and in the future, it would be helpful, I think, for all of us if you could showcase how the emergency proclamation is affecting the prioritization and the streamlining of upcoming projects. And I know it's going to depend upon the clarity that comes out of the state, but maybe a separate section in your discussion of future work plan issues would be helpful.
Sure, absolutely. And just to note, I think the kind of stopgap approach right now, before we have guidance from the state, is going to be to build in flexibility in the work plan to allow for projects and programs to take advantage of this suspension of CEQA and the Coastal Act, et cetera. And so really building in that flexibility in the work plan and modifying the way we describe projects so that we don't need to go back to the board to make specific changes of wording or geographic area, et cetera, based on guidance. We don't want to slow ourselves down. We'd like to be ready to move forward and be first in line or second in line once that avenue becomes available to us, because it may be that there are a lot of projects from all over the state being submitted to agencies with very little staff. So we have that in mind, and we're hoping to move quickly once we can move.
That's great. Thank you. Sorry, Bruce. Yep.
And something that you haven't mentioned is the work that you've been doing with the Environmentally Sound Practices Partnership. And that we have some new board members here, but we've been working for going back to 2020 in listening to the environmental community. We have a 28-page document, which is a set of environmentally sound practices that we've committed to implement on the ground to protect the soil, the water, wildlife, all birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees, the whole thing. So what I want to say is that Anne, I'm on the ESP steering committee, but Anne puts time into communicating with them regularly to bring them up to date. And I was in the ESP meeting this last month where Anne talked about this, this executive order, and is answering questions. And these are formidable entities. They're individuals who have litigated elsewhere, and they're formidable folks. They're informed, they're engaged, they're interested, and Anne is providing assurance as to our full compliance with protecting the environment in accordance with the ESP practices. So Anne, I want to thank you for what you're doing, and I don't see it in the work plan, but it's a substantive piece of work that Anne's doing, is keeping the environmental community well informed on what we're doing. So Anne, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Any public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time. Oh,
Oh,
I
we have
apologize.
public-
There are
oh,
no
sorry.
remote attendees with any questions at this time.
We have
You
some
have a
public
question in the
comment
room.
in the room.
Hi, thank you, Board President and other board members. I'm Sarah Laberton, and I just had a quick question about the 80-20. I was under the impression that that conversation had happened. I'm sure there's more talk about it in the Ops Committee, and I'm wondering if we can just get an updated report during the Ops Committee report today on what they had talked about, what that discussion was like during the Ops Committee. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right. Phew. All right, we're moving on to committee reports. Fire Safe Marin.
And Fire Safe Marin will be joining us remotely in just a moment.
Fire Safe Marin is going to be coming online. And there they are. Welcome. Or not.
Jen, you should have the ability to, there we go.
Hi, welcome.
Good afternoon. I am here for Fire Safe Marin and available to answer any questions on the report that is within your packet.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Fire Safe Marin? Please, Catherine.
A comment. I am so impressed that almost every Sunday or every day we have IJ insert from Fire Safe Marin, reminding us about one detail or another that we can do at home to make our houses more secure. You're really impressive. Thank you so much for keeping it up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a comment too. Jennifer, I want to thank you for coming out to Stinson Beach last Sunday, and everyone was talking about that. They still are, actually, just how wonderful you are. And we just want to thank you, and we'll extend invitations for some future meetings as well. Thank you.
Please do. It was a delight to be out in Stinson Beach, and we hope we can be there more regularly.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right. And appreciate having the detailed report in our packet. Thank you. All right. Any public comment on this item?
There are no hands at this time.
All right, thank you. Update from the Operations Committee.
Just moving over, someone listed. as
Don't
a
believe
county
anyone
fire
from the
department,
Operations Committee.
maybe Jason Weber, so I'm hoping that is the case.
Oh, great.
Jason, if that's you as Marin County Fire, I'm moving you over as a panelist. Guess not. It's up to you, Ann. You're up.
Okay, sounds good. I will just share my screen just to show what the agenda was at the last Operations Committee meeting. Our last meeting was March 13th at 10 a.m. We've been meeting once a month. This meeting included also a discussion of the emergency proclamation and what that might mean for our work, and a general update of the work plan development process, as well as diving into the JPA-wide proposals. So again, talking through all of the different JPA-wide proposals that have been submitted so far. These are things like the environmental compliance program and Fire Safe Marin's work, etc. So dove into those quite a bit. We have more discussions to have at both the ATC and Operations Committee in terms of our grants program and direct assistance program for next year. We're going to be hosting quite a few conversations, at least 2 workshops with ATC members and other relevant staff from member agencies to dive into that program and how to modify it for next year, including how to emphasize Zone 0. We presented also the overall budget, a similar slide to what you saw today, and a discussion of the general approach of the 80% and 20% set aside. No particular decisions were made around that, so it was just a discussion item that's our approach again this year. No opposition to it or modifications to that approach at this time. We also have an item that we include on our agenda for discussing LRA map updates, such as those that were just updated in February, and Zone 0 regulations in case there are coordination items, because we'd like to support our FPOs around Marin and other folks working on this and make sure that we're all on the same page and supporting each other's work. And potentially creating staff report templates and public education materials to support this work. So if there are other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I do invite member agency staff and others to join at the Operations Committee to ask these questions, particularly around 80-20, that percentage, or other things as they come up. The next meeting will be in April, and we'll be discussing the zone-specific project proposals that are being submitted right now into the portal. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the board on this item? Catherine?
I hate to be such a dummy, but what's 80-20?
Oh, sorry, that is the 80%, 20% approach to budget.
Not AD. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Sorry.
Hello, Chief Weber.
What did I miss, Chief?
We're just getting an update on the Ops Committee.
I think you did a fantastic job, Ann. I was running up here from downstairs. My computer wouldn't switch over to panelist. Hi, everybody. I'm open to any questions you have.
Now you can ask your questions. I think it was just a general we had from the public. Yes, we had a question around core and the funding, and was there anything that came from the ops discussion that we'd want to get an update on?
You're talking about the priority piece. We didn't dive deep into the priority piece. I think the intent there is to strike conversation, and where we do have projects that may need some enhancement in one area or another, the flexibility to do that, but it needs to be discussed as a group. And we understand it's a bit of a tug of war, right? Somebody has to give a little bit if something's getting. So I think it's just a discussion. We did not dive deep at the ops group.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll open that if there's anyone from the public on that one.
And there are no hands raised at this time.
Any questions from the public? In the room? No. All right, seeing no more comments, we'll go ahead and move forward. We are now moving on. We have 2 presentations now. These are informational and updates, so we get lots of questions around these items. So welcome. Who's gonna, Scott and Charlotte? Great. All right, welcome. Thank you. So the first one, we're going to start with science and data-driven approach.
Great.
Scott,
I'm
you
just going to introduce the item, and then I'm going to hand it over to Scott, who's going to be presenting the vast majority of this information. This is a really exciting topic. It's a long time coming, and I just want to set a little bit of context to it. This board gave us the direction several years ago now, it must be 2020 or 2021, maybe 2020, to incorporate science and data into our decision making. It's a big lift. There's a lot of coordination and a lot of work with our consultants and our member agencies to figure out how to do this in a way that's meaningful. So why take this on? Many reasons. One is we've committed to doing it. We've been committing to taking data and science and the best available data and science and incorporating that into what we do. This work will help us achieve a bigger bang for the buck. So where should new projects take place on the landscape to make better decisions and reduce wildfire risk in places that are a high priority or high population density, or in areas where there are pathways moving fire quickly across the landscape? Can also tell us where to maintain existing projects in a way that's more meaningful. Are there some areas that need to be maintained more often than others that are very critical to maintaining annually, say? It helps us measure progress towards reducing that risk, and that gets to the dashboard conversation that we're having later, and that Charlotte's going to be presenting. It helps us kind of figure out how much we're actually moving the needle on the landscape. And then it helps us communicate that to the public, communicate that to the insurance industry. How much are we actually reducing risk, and how could Marin communities be rewarded for doing all of this work? It helps us manage adaptively. So are there things we should be doing differently in order to make our dollars go further and protect more homes, more people? And it also provides great methodology and great justification and great visual resources for grant applications so that we can leverage the tax dollars that we collect here in Marin and bring in more funding from outside sources. And we use all of this to help us measure our progress towards the goals that this board has identified. Right now, we've been spending a lot of time on Goal 1, vegetation management, and Goal 5, defensible space and home hardening. So we took on this process quite a long time ago, actually, just by building our GIS program, figuring out how to collect data as we're doing projects on the landscape, vegetation management projects. How do we collect a consistency from one area to another from one human being to another, etc. So we've been working on that for a really long time and are here and collecting data, consistent data, working through all the details together. We've been bringing in the ATC ad hoc subcommittee from last year's ATC and other member agency staff into these working group conversations. We've been meeting since September, diving into one tool at a time, really diving in, asking the hard questions, thinking through the opportunities and the limitations of each one, and then having conversations, really picking them apart and thinking through how to use them in a meaningful way. And then member agencies have been working with folks like Scott specifically to dive into his tool and Vibrant Planet's tool and the evacuation ingress egress work, and think through how it might work within their zone to help them prioritize within their zone, either within existing projects or future projects, etc. And then reporting back to the larger group, how is it going? What are you seeing that's an opportunity that's working well? Which tools seem to resonate with your approach? And then we're learning as we go, and we will be continuing to share lessons learned and figure out how to use this in a meaningful, kind of consistent way. So right now, member agencies have been working with Scott and others to figure out how to prioritize within their zone, how to think through this project development for this coming work plan. And then we are happy to be here today talking to you about this and reporting out what we've been learning so far and what we've been working on so far. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Scott, who's going to dive much deeper into all of these topics.
Great. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Anne. I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully you can see it now. So I want to take you on a brief tour of the tools that we have available to us to help measure, help plan, help track progress towards our risk reduction goals. And I want to start out, as I often do, by thinking about how broad of a spectrum we have in terms of the things that we can do to reduce wildfire risk, right? Working from the house out, we can do home hardening, we can do defensible space, we can start doing shaded fuel breaks, we can get further out, we can start doing splats in the wildland, and that's all going to change fire behavior. Simultaneously, we can change public behavior through things like alerting, through things like improved evacuation, and through public education. So we have lots of things that we can do. Correspondingly, we have many tools that can help us understand how we are doing to improve our wildfire resilience holistically. So far we have a pretty robust suite of 5 different tools that help us with risk assessment and also with planning and prioritization and making sure that we have the projects that have the biggest bang for the buck. So I'm going to talk through just super briefly each of those tools today, and then I'm going to give some ideas about how they can be used together. And I think that's a really exciting place to be because it lets us adapt to the planning context that we have in Marin today or tomorrow, right? Like it's a very flexible system. And so these tools, each kind of has a sweet spot, but together they help us, design new programs and then also evaluate and improve our existing programs. And then they span from out in the vegetation in the wildlands all the way down into the built environment. So really capturing that full spectrum of tasks that we might need to prioritize and track progress for. Now, if you are not a wildfire behavior modeler, you might ask, how do these tools understand what is the vegetation? Like, how do we know what the fire is going to be doing? Because that's a really core part to this task. So I just wanted to super briefly call out this data set that we have in Marin, which is the fine scale fuels data set. So this is a 5-meter resolution data set, which captures what does the fuel look like on the ground? And what does it look like in the canopy? How thick is the canopy? How high up off the ground is it? That was developed in 2020 as part of the CWPP process. But I want to just share this because it's really fundamental to how all these tools look at the world and capture a great deal of what the wildfire is going to be doing and how it poses risk to the community. So with that in mind, we've got these 5 tools. I'm going to just briefly talk about each one. So the first one that we have is the fire pathways. So this is looking at where is the fire going to be entering the community quickly, and considering factors like terrain, fuel type, wind speed, and the relative location of the community, where are those contiguous paths that fire can burn in and burn really quickly. And we saw in LA, right, those fires moved really, really fast. So evaluating where fire might be moving quickly and where there are contiguous corridors of fuel can be really helpful in understanding which portions of the community are most at risk of, really potentially catastrophic exposure. We pair that with vegetation management risk assessment. So here we're looking more holistically at what is the fire going to be doing in a particular place, a particular project area that we are doing vegetation management in, both before we do that vegetation management and then also after. So we'll take many of those same factors, wind speed, fuel type, topography, things like that, and we'll make a holistic profile of how much did we move the needle in fire behavior, right? So we have one tool that's looking at, where's the fire going to be coming from? And then one tool that is looking now holistically at how do we change the fire behavior within those areas that we've decided to treat. Now moving down into the built environment, looking at the on-parcel risk assessment, right? So we looked at things, fire behavior on vegetation, generally on open spaces. Now on a private parcel, what are those risk factors that we might encounter, right? So this spans home hardening and defensible space. And that's going to vary based on what is on a parcel, but also where that parcel is located. Is it located on a hot, dry, windy hilltop, or is it located in a moist valley bottom with low wind speeds, right? And so trying to create a unique profile for each parcel based on what defensible space inspectors find on each parcel. And that allows us to get a prioritized list of what should this resident do, for the most risk reduction, but also a community level profile of what are the issue types that are most hazardous in a particular neighborhood or a particular community. Evacuation is a super important part of our wildfire resilience strategy, right? And we want to make sure that we can get people out safely and we can get firefighters in safely. So Sonoma Technology has the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment tool, and they considered a whole variety of different factors that affect wildfire risk specific to evacuation. So everything from communication and demographics and how many people live in a particular place, to what is the fire going to be doing, how likely is it to get to a particular place, to things about the roadway. So how complex is the roadway? Is it really windy? Is it going to serve as a bottleneck? And looking at comprehensively considering all those factors, where would we experience difficulty in evacuation, and where could we plan projects that might help us alleviate that difficulty? And this tool is pretty exciting because I think it's one of the only tools that we have that directly starts to capture some of those human behavior elements that I mentioned at the beginning. Our other tools are generally focused on how are we changing the fire behavior. This can help us understand a little bit of how we're changing the human behavior and alleviating some of that human behavior risk. And then finally, last tool here is Vibrant Planet. And so this is a little bit different in that it is creating a sort of a shared operating picture of helping understand not just where there are fire benefits, right, fire risk reduction benefits, but also where there may be auxiliary or like co-benefits to doing work in a particular place. So where's the fire behavior and fire risk greatest, but where could we also potentially improve forest health? Where could we improve recreation, water quality, things like that, and to create a holistic plan that kind of incorporates all the stakeholders that are going to have to collaborate on getting a project approved and implemented. So as Anne mentioned, through this last 9 months, we have been working with member agencies to start implementing these tools, not just in a theoretical context, but actually on individual problems. And we're making really good progress in terms of how these tools go into the individual problems that the agencies are facing. So we have done work with Nevada, we've done work with San Rafael. I'll talk about in a minute, work with Southern Marin, among others. But it's, I think, really exciting that we're starting to come up with not just the tools, but also the guidelines for how to use the tools, how to interpret what's coming out of the tools, and how to turn that into a project plan or some ways of improving existing programs. These tools work very well by themselves, right, alone, but they can also be used together. And I think that's where we start to really come up with some very interesting and very unique solutions, where we use these tools together to contribute to the unique questions that an agency might have, or that we as the NWPA might have. So these are just examples here. And so one example might be, right, where would we be able to do vegetation management that also improves our evacuation risk? So this is probably going to take the form of a roadside clearance, but where would it give us the most bang for our buck? We can combine the fire pathways, we can combine the evacuation risk assessment, we can combine Vibrant Planet to start come up with high return on investment projects that contribute to evacuation risk, and they also contribute to lowering fire behavior along those evacuation corridors. We've got collections of tools that we can use to evaluate, and Charlotte will go into more detail on this, but how has risk changed over the past several years? And then, right, how would we be able to design new tools, new projects that use these metrics to be the most efficient projects in terms of the metrics that we have set out as being the most important, like our guiding strategic metrics. How can we design projects around those so that we know that we are contributing high return on investment vegetation management projects? I want to spend just a few minutes giving a very brief example of how these tools come together, and I want to frame it as a real example. This is in Southern Marin, and we've talked already today about how there's potential for a Southern Marin sort of networked shaded fuel break around Mill Valley. And so this is a real example. The results I'm about to show are hypothetical about how we could use the tools together, but I think they show the value of being able to use these tools in a system, and they show how they can really improve that planning process and make it more efficient. So we're going to use the fire pathways, we're going to use the on-parcel risk assessment, and we're going to use the Vibrant Planet to understand where those high return on investment areas of treatment are. So we're going to start out and we're going to say, according to the on-parcel risk assessment, so again, scoring from what defensible space inspectors have noted is on the property, where are the hotspots of on-parcel risk, right? Where might parcels be least prepared to receive fire? Which neighborhoods are least prepared to receive fire? And we can come up with some delineation of where those neighborhoods are. And then we'll use the fire pathways to say, how is fire going to get there? How is fire going to reach these areas where fire getting into those neighborhoods could be really, really bad? And then we'll use the Vibrant Planet, and I'll talk through this slide in a second, but we'll use the Vibrant Planet to understand how do we interrupt those pathways? How do we do vegetation management along those pathways so that the fire behavior is mediated before it gets to the built environment? And so what we're looking at here is a hierarchical weighting. So where we most want to go, where we're telling the computer we most want to go, is along the fire pathways that are around Mill Valley. And then second, we might say, it's okay if it's not on a fire pathway. We still want to be around Mill Valley, right? Because we like shaded fuel breaks, and we like perimeter rings that give us that confidence that this project will intercept the fire before it gets to the built environment. And then because we're interested in exploring the potential for splats, high value projects further from the built environment, we'll consider areas that are along fire pathways that are further out from Mill Valley. And what we end up with as we do this is these blue polygons here, which I think really nicely complement the existing network of treatments in yellow, and start to give us a sense of where the most effective vegetation management areas would be for this particular planning context. And again, this is not yet a recommendation. This is just an example of how these tools fit together. But I think it really effectively starts to give us a place to focus down, right? And a place for the agencies, VMSs, and others engaged in the planning process to start drilling down into these individual polygons, and then using their professional expertise to understand, the exact boundaries that we would want to, to do a project in these particular areas, right? So it basically is allowing us to focus the entire landscape now into a few polygons that are modeled to be very effective in reducing fire behavior, in interrupting fire pathways, and in protecting those vulnerable areas of the built environment. So this is one example. And then I think the other way that these tools are really, really useful is, again, the ability to track risk over time. And I'll leave it here. Charlotte's going to pick that up and talk a little bit about the dashboards that we have to be able to communicate some of these results to the public. But I would love to take any of your questions now.
Wow. Okay. Questions?
And if I, there's a lot to digest here.
Yeah.
And if you have questions that are more tailored towards a deep dive, then we can set you up some time to chat with Scott for that deep dive.
Director Goins. Or Catherine?
Incredible presentation, and thank you for piecing this all together. Thank you, Ann and Mark, and for all the work the staff has done. This is really amazing. It's going to help us prioritize and invest strategically. It may cause us to not reinvest in some of the places that we've done work previously. But I have a specific question, and it's come from my community and in discussions with staff, is that I live at X Garner Drive in Novato, and my parcel is being rated in accordance with hazard, very high, however it is. But can you talk about who holds this data, number one, who can access this data, number two, and what is our policy in regards to protection of private property data and information?
I'll cover that. So when it comes to our community level data, we have no problem sharing the community level data. That would be like the shaded fuel breaks, the strategically placed local area treatments. But we do have a privacy policy in place that our parcel level data is ours and is not shared. It is only shared within our member agencies and those who are doing the analysis for us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Mark, I know, is that in writing somewhere?
Yeah. It's
okay.
in our.
I believe it's online as well.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I just want to, I'd like to see words in print. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Director Hiller.
So going back to where you're showing pathways that we are either making or, the ones with, I think they were like green tubes. I'm not a good map reader, but the topography.
Are you thinking about this one?
This one, yes, exactly. So this looks like a goal. I don't know how much we've done, but the topography, just looking at the map, there's all kinds of different inclines and high and lows, and how doable is this actually in terms of getting crews in there? If it's very steep terrain, this might be so basic, but I'm just wondering, how do we implement this?
If I can
I'll cover that. I can cover that one, Ann. So when we look at a pathway and we look at the terrain, we actually do look at the feasibility of being able to do the work in that terrain. And if we can't do the work in that terrain, that leaves us a high residual risk, which can cause us to do work elsewhere where we can get that work done. And so that's part of the decision-making process and the balance of the work that we do.
And Mark, if I can add, we also are looking at this thinking if we can't treat the landscape somewhere, we need to do other actions. We need to reinforce education. We need to take complementary actions that protect the community because we're unable to affect the fuels.
And if I could jump in as somebody speaking, sorry.
I did. Sorry, should I repeat that?
Yeah.
Would you like me to repeat? Sorry. Okay.
Anne, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I just want to note that, all of these tools, the models are only part of the conversation, and that any of the planning processes, any of the, development of project proposals, etc., has to involve local expertise, and these models do not replace that. So we would need to think through feasibility, access, willingness of landowners or land management agencies to do this kind of work. Is it mid-slope? Is it a riparian area? Are there, sensitive species in the area? So that's all part of the conversation too. But these are great for starting that conversation and framing it and thinking through where to put our energy in terms of those conversations. But it will never replace local expertise.
Great, thank you. Director Milton.
This is very exciting to see all the stuff that you all have been doing since 2020. And I'm just wondering, it seems like a lot of behind the scenes projects that aren't really vegetation management. It's the science behind how we prioritize. And I'm wondering, maybe Mark, how much we've spent on these 5 things. It's probably not very much, and it's going to ensure that the work that's done now and going forward will be that much more productive. And I'm also, a second question, I'm wondering if the modeling changes over time. I assume it does based on the conditions and the work, et cetera.
You are right when you say that the investment that we've put into it, it's been more of a time investment than it has been a monetary investment. And so we've had different line items for whether it's Vibrant Planet, Sonoma Technology, and so on and so forth, probably in line with the investment or less than the investment that we've made towards environmental compliance, to be honest with you, if I had to do a quick thumbnail sketch. But the return on investment, as you point out, is going to be huge. And then I saw Scott nod his head, and we are updating the models based on the vegetation management work that we were doing.
And also the climate change too, that seems to be happening, accelerating.
Yeah, and so and this is where CAL FIRE did their maps. They averaged weather, whereas we're using the highest weather extremes because we feel that the urban conflagrations happen on the extreme days, not on the average weather days.
Great, thank you. Other questions? All right, let's move on because we're approaching 2 hours, and I think it'd be great to be able to see the dashboards. I imagine these will all come back again at different times. So, Charlotte, and let's make sure your microphone, it was a little, yeah, let's bring it up a
Can
little
everybody
bit.
hear me now? No?
Bring it up.
Can everybody?
Bend it so it's facing you. There you go.
Better now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look at my screen while I speak right into this mic. Okay, let's do it. So, good afternoon, directors, members of the public. My name is Charlotte Jourdain. I'm a contractor for Fire. I'm here to present the progress dashboard on our 5th strategic goal, the implementation of defensible space and home hardening. The dashboard for goal 1 is not ready, so I won't be presenting that today, but it will be very soon. Before I show you the screen and you stop listening to what I have to say, I just wanted to remind you that we went through a very long process to establish the 5 key strategic measures that are displayed on this dashboard. We started with an ad hoc subcommittee of the board that vetted some proposals for different measures. We then went to a working group made of members of the ATC and the Ops Committee that fully vetted the measures for their usefulness in tracking progress and in being able to display and show change. And then back to the full board for approval. I believe this was in June of 2023, maybe 24, I forgot. Anyways, we selected 5 key strategic measures. Before I show them to you, I want to be sure that you all hear that your agencies have access to a lot more data and a lot more measures than what we are showing you here and that what we are showing the public. And that's because they need more information, right, to monitor their programs, to make tweaks to their programs, which they are actively doing already for the last 2 years, looking at some of the data that I'm going to show you, but also the data, more details on the data that they have available thanks to our partners at Fireside. And so I'll take this opportunity to really say this dashboard in particular would not be possible without the subscription to Fireside and our contract for services with Willow. And Scott, thank you so much for all the work that you put into enabling us to really show program evaluation and impact measures and not just outcomes.
Also, a big thank you to the Green Info Network for putting the platform together. So I'm gonna show you how to get to the dashboard very briefly. So if you're on the Marin Wildfire website and you go to, projects, fire resistant homes, and you scroll down the page, under second paragraph of program goal, you could see visit our multi-year progress dashboard. So I'm now going to show that. And the reason I wanted to show you how to access it is because this is the dashboard for goal 5. You have here on the upper right, when you're looking at your screen, the ability to see the data for all zones together, or you can select your own zone. And so if you'd like to follow along looking at your own zones, you're free to do that at this point. I'll look at the JPA-wide all zones together. So I'm going to do my best to give a brief overview because I know we're short for time, and then happy to stay behind and answer any questions. And like Mark says, this will be published and showcased and discussed a lot next week. So I hope a lot of you get to attend the conferences we have planned and hear some of the presentations. On the left-hand side here, we have a small intro text that describes, that lets the user know to select a zone on the right and or to toggle between the years. I will start with 2024. 2025 obviously is in progress. And then the first tab is this year-over-year tab, which I think you will find fascinating. That's where we really look at progress over time. And then we also have a link to a story map for people who are not sure what defensible space is, and sort of explaining a little bit more about the concepts that are being discussed here. And we also have a link for those who want details on the calculations for each measure. So 5 strategic measures on the bottom, a map that really only reflects the first measure, and that's the the coverage of our evaluation program. Darker colors means more evaluation in that area. So the first measure really is showing us of the target parcels that our member agencies decided are priority to evaluate. In 2024, we've inspected over 30,000 of them, and that's 100% of what our agencies decided are priorities. There's a link here if you want more detail again on that measure. Sorry, I know I'm moving fast, but I want to be sure we end on time.
No, that's okay. I actually just want to pause for 1 second because
Okay.
those of us who have our computers are all trying to find.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay.
You're still trying to find the link? Okay. So if you're on the homepage of Marin Wildfire and you go to projects, and then you go to fire resistant homes, which is our 5th goal, and then you scroll down here, you can see the visit our multi-year dashboard. There's a couple of other places you can, sorry, are you hearing me?
Yes, no, it's good. Thank you. Perfect.
There's a couple of other places you can access the dashboard from the website. And I also have, well, I have a QR code, but I think that's going to make it even more complicated. Are we good to continue? Okay, great. Thank you. So the second strategic measure is looking at the number or percent of residents who have been evaluated and have taken the time to open their wildfire risk report within 15 days. So that number is a little bit, it's not any time. And this came from the Ops Committee. This was a request to really move the needle on people taking action before fire season starts. So the idea is we want to evaluate residents, and then we want them to open their report, within the next 2 weeks, so they can start planning what they need to do, what contractors they need to invite, how to apply for grants, and start looking at all these resources. So that is the measure that, and I know Fireside has done a lot of work with the Alliance and others to really try to move the needle on this measure and try to encourage residents to look at their report after we've evaluated them. The third strategic measure is looking at the number of parcels that have mitigated their defensible space violations. So there's lots that can be found on a parcel. There's violations There is home hardening recommendations, and then there's defensible space recommendations. This is strictly looking at violations. Again, agencies have access to this same percentage for other things that they'd like to see the resolution rate on. This is simply showing defensible space violations. And so you can see definitely, room for progress here, right? So only 19% of our residents JPA wide have taken action to mitigate violations we've identified. The next measure is looking at the parcels without high risk issues. And here I want to point back to the presentation Scott just gave you, where he illustrated the tool that he called the on-parcel risk assessment. That's the idea that through the modeling Scott is doing for us, we can assign a score, a risk score, to each and every single discovery or item we identify on a parcel. And one say a species or a type of vegetation might be riskier in one area and less risky in another area. It's not because it's, juniper that it's always equally risky everywhere on the landscape. So this is trying to give us a sense for, are we resolving the right things? Are we taking away the highest risks first? That's what this measure is at. We started by defining high risk issues as the top 20% of risk across the entire JPA. And this is a threshold that we together can choose to drop as we make progress. The final measure is looking at the projected flame length for the issues that we found on parcels. We know that maintaining a low flame length interrupts or slows the spread of fire. So we're measuring parcels that have, across everything that was found on the parcel, nothing is going to have a projected flame length of more than 4 feet. That's what that percentage is saying there. So I think, I don't know, do I have time to go to the year over year or should I stop? Yeah? Okay. Quickly? Okay. So the year over year tab is the first one there. Essentially brings back these 5 measures that I just went through, but shows you a comparison of progress since 2023. And I think that's really the key one, right, to show how we're progressing. Sometimes we are a little bit we're stagnant, or sometimes as we increase the number of evaluations, we will suddenly see that we're not doing as well on the measure because we've actually evaluated more parcels, we found more problems that we didn't know existed, right? So it's not, you have to sort of understand what the process is. But again, our agencies and our inspectors have access to a lot more data and are looking at this to try to practice adaptive management and move the needle on all these measures. Okay, that's it for me. That was a race. Thank you.
Okay, how many of us looked up our zone? Which is what I think people will do, right? That's exactly what will happen. I have a couple of questions, but let me open it up to others. Really? They're still looking at I'm going to ask my question. Right now with the inspection reports, we know that there's some inspection reports that do 360 and some that just do a 180, meaning in front of the house or fully around the house. Does this include both, or can we limit it to only those homes that have done a 360?
This includes both, if I remember, right?
Yeah, and the reasoning was that if we did not include, if we only included the 360s, then we're excluding data that we know exists from our modeling, and we're ignoring risks that are identified from the street view.
Is there a way to segment out?
Yes.
In the non-public dashboards, yes.
Okay. I think that's really valuable because we know that we're getting very limited information of the 180 inspection. And so I think that and I think that if we want to encourage people to really do the full 360 review, it might be helpful to actually publicly show that information, or maybe it's a limited show or we share, because we're not able. I think there's some messaging we can do around that.
Totally agree. And in the private dashboards, or our member agencies can do that deep dive. But for the public dashboard, we felt it was important not to ignore risks that we had identified.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah.
Julie.
Charlotte, I think this is fantastic. Thank you so much. On the zones, on the central zone, I'm just wondering if there's any more specificity, if you could have like the town of Ross or the town of Larkspur. Is that something that's available to the public, or is that only something that's available to the agency and ops?
It's available it's available through Fireside, and so we can create reports. Again, I just want to say this is nothing compared to what's in Fireside. This is like ridiculously simple. It's the power of the data that's available through the inspection program is something like just not very often seen.
We're getting close to 750,000 data points.
Yeah, which can be analyzed through probably over 250 different angles, just to give you an idea. So any question you want, we can answer it. And so agents, to answer the more specific question, I think the town of Ross, let's say, you can work with your fire agency to get a report for exactly these measures for your town if that's what you wish, and it's automated. By the way, all this data, everything is automatically populated in the dashboard, right? Staff is not spending any time doing this. This was one of the criterias for these strategic measures, that we don't create a system where we have to input a lot of, obviously there's the evaluation time. The inspectors go and evaluate. That's a time spent, but everything is automated. This refreshes on a monthly basis.
It's the one-touch approach. When the evaluator goes and does the inspection on Fireside, the data is entered into Fireside. It automatically gets exported to Willow Labs. Willow Labs does the analysis in the back end, and then the results gets pumped back into Fireside, and then Fireside automatically updates these.
Any other questions? Do you mind bringing up San Rafael? I don't mind bringing it up. It's okay.
I think
I'll out there.
Jones has a question.
And 2024. Oh, thank you.
There's an online question. I don't know if
It was just my conversation. Okay. Let's open it up to public comment. Do we have a question online? Director Jones, did you have a question?
Oh, I was just curious, if it would be very easy to get by zone rather than percentages, like just the base numbers of how many parcels
I just pulled up
evaluated.
San Rafael. It's under,
so right
so
here.
you select each zone.
So Mill Valley would be Southern Marin. Select Southern Marin.
Is that helpful?
Oh, yes. So there's I looked at Southern Marin, and for our zone, where I can see percentages of, like, you can see a heat map, but I don't see where I can see like the number there, those numbers. Thank you.
It's a lot to take in.
Okay. Can we go back to San Rafael for a second? I just want to walk through. So 10,000 homes, residents have been at the bottom. So just walking through. But the real takeaway for me is how many have opened the report, which is only 15%. And of those, 9.4% have actually worked on, and it's at least half of their work.
So that's not of those, because not everyone has defensible space violations. Just remember that, right?
Okay.
But yes, you're correct. Of the violations found, and this is actually on this one, it's actually, I hate to say it's a little bit worse than that, because there's a 50% discount on this. So Marin Wildfire's decided to make meaningful progress. An initial step is for residents to resolve 50% of their defensible space violation. So this percentage reflects that 50% discount. But that's the number of defensible space violations that have been resolved. And if you click here, all these measures have a link down here that will explain that in more detail.
And then the 70% without high risk issues, that would be yay, but
yeah,
but I'm not sure how that ties in with the fact that
yeah. So we evaluate parcels. We find issues, right? Things. We send them to Scott, and he models the risk of each and every thing that we found. And then he does that for the entire JPA. So then he ranks all of these findings by risk, top to bottom, top, highest risk to low risk. So this is saying that 70% of the evaluated parcels in San Rafael do not have discovery or issues in the top 20% of the whole JPA. Right?
Okay.
I know it's hard to wrap your head around
No,
this.
I know, and that's why I'm trying to make sure that we put the right they're all really, really important measures, but how much, if anyone in the public looks at this, can quickly tell the story.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, because we want the story to be easy.
We want it to be easy. I've worked really hard with Fire Safe Marin and with, I've got more, I got to the point where I got a lot of conflicting advice on how to word and how to explain. And so I just had to sort of stop, because I think everybody's sort of, in the end, this is a complex thing. We want it to be easy, but it is complex. It's the reality. So.
And there might be, I'm sure there'll be opportunity that we could just do a quick focus groups with some people who have fairly limited experience and knowledge around this, and see if people can get it.
That would be great. My husband's been my focus group.
I normally use my cat. In terms of the yellows on the graphic, that would be, from knowing that area, is mostly open space.
So the heat map is blurry on purpose, right? So people can't zoom in to their parcel or their neighbor parcel and see if it's been evaluated or not. So we're respecting sort of a little bit of privacy there. So it's not exact, but it gives you a sense for where evaluations were focused in San Rafael.
Yeah. But I think, just looking at it, even when it's out, whatever, those are just more the open space areas, which you wouldn't have evaluations there. So again, I'm wondering if we need to focus on, because it's not saying go and do something there, because there's nothing there. There are no homes
Well,
there.
this is saying there is, completely white would be 0. A little bit yellow would be 1 or less in that area. So it's just shading, showing the shading.
Okay.
We can't pin it to a specific parcel for.
All right. Okay, folks, sorry, I am way digging because I'm a data person.
Yeah, and if I could just give one closing comment about the numbers. All numbers are relative, and all numbers are relative, and so, I'll compare it to humidity. Humidity is a number, and what does that number mean? And normally, and so when we look at these numbers, we're going to be looking more at trends and how that number relates to what we're seeing on the ground. So you're seeing a snapshot right now. I think where the importance will be is as we watch those numbers that are relative, how they're changing over time, how we feel humidity decrease or increase, and how that's impacting our work. So rather than taking a deep dive now, look at the long term. Let's look at these numbers over years.
Yeah, great. All right, we now have a tea party of people. Okay. Last on the agenda, we have 2 information items. There is no motion required on these. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Charlotte. We've been waiting and waiting for this, and this is super exciting. Really, really appreciate it. We did public comment. Yes, thank you. Information items, we have the minutes from Executive Committee and Operations Committee. Does anyone have any requests for future agenda items? Yeah. Yes?
This may not be an agenda for the whole board, but could we have presentation on when you get the details of the grants program? Can you present to us the grants program so that we understand, well, and this, again, you can tell me if it's better offline or something, so that we can understand and the public can understand what the timing is.
That'll all be part, when we present the work plan, that'll be included.
Great, with some attention to, more details than
Yes.
go on the website, because go on the website doesn't say it all. Okay?
Great, thank you.
And unless things change dramatically, there's a really good chance that we will not need to have an executive committee or a board meeting in April.
Okay. Right now, though, it is scheduled for the 17th of April, and if we will be changing that, we will let everyone know, but please follow along with the online meetings, and another reminder to meet with your ops and ATC representatives. Appreciate it, and we are adjourned. Thank you.